Hello, I'm Jay Strack, and I want to welcome you to There's Always a Way podcast. And I'm privileged to get to meet some of the most inspirational, some of the most dynamic, and some of the folks that have really helped me and that I've desperately needed to learn from their experience. And my greatest desire is to share with you those that have made a profound difference in our country, a profound difference in their industry, but also a profound difference in the way people live. And one of those today, one of our very first that I wanted to share with you, is a gentleman named Scott Reddick. And Scott, thank you for being with us.
I'm happy to be here, Jay. Thanks for the invite.
Well, it's hard for me knowing, you've got an impressive background educationally. And then I noticed it said Ohio State. And I just want, I'm a Florida guy. So I'm just saying, I've gotten over that, all right? And not only did you graduate from, obviously, one of the great universities in the country, but you've also gone on to the renowned Kellogg School of Business and became a leadership scholar.
Yep.
So, well done. Took a lot of work, Now, Scott, I got to ask you a question I ask everybody. What is as a leader, as a businessman, as a father, you're a man of faith. I mean, so many things we could say about you, but what is the first thing you think of? What leaps to mind when you hear the phrase, there's always a way?
It's the word's persistence, and that's just, I don't know. I can't even explain why, but I am wired that way. I've been wired that way a long time. There's a lot of influences, I suppose, that have caused me to be like that. But yeah, I embrace that phrase. So I totally am motivated by there's always a way.
Wow, persistence. I love that. Now, I also know you love baseball. You've got a passion for baseball, which means you've got to be a New York Yankees fan. Right?
No.
Tried and true, and can't wait for Yankee Stadium to open up. And no, I'm sorry, but was that a misprint or what?
Yeah, no, not the Yankees. But persistence is where I get this from, though. So I've been a Cleveland Indians fan for a long time. So,
well, man, endurance may be a better word. Endurance, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Scott, as a leader, I know you've played baseball. I also know you've coached baseball. Knowing you a little bit like I do, that you're probably keep up with certain players that inspire you, motivate you, you're fascinated by, or you just, you like watching them play or how they played the game. But I want to ask you and I grew up loving baseball, and almost first 7-8 years of my life got the opportunity to be bat boy in spring training for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Wow.
And by the time I was 11, got to be the bat boy for every team that came in to play the Pittsburgh Pirates in spring training, the Grapefruit League. But so I grew up very influenced by baseball and very grateful for that. I wonder, what did you learn from your time playing and from coaching, from the game of baseball, that you think that you really rely upon in being a leader?
Yeah, I can't claim a lot of experience playing it. I mean, I played it into junior high and all that, so I wasn't a player into college or anything. But coaching is where I had the memorable experiences. When my boys were growing up, got very active in coaching either their teams or so-called AAU teams.
Right.
And it's an absolute joy to be able to mold together a group of disparate talents and backgrounds and skill sets into a team that they realize they're better together than as separate individuals. And I can't count how many times I've reflected in either business or other organizational leadership roles that the lessons learned in just trying to mold together a little league baseball team, which sounds so simple, it carries over. And it's not to impugn people I've managed in the business world. They're like the kid in right field picking dandelions out of the right field grass. But you run into lots of situations where you're just trying to find right seat on the bus, a right position for everybody. And when you find that combination of right positions, your organization, your team can really hum, and they know it too. And that's an exciting point to get to.
Well, Scott, the greatest lesson I learned was from a coach. He said, Jay, you're having a hard enough time hitting balls in the strike zone. Why in the world are you swinging at balls down in the dirt or over your head?
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times that comes to mind in my life. Jay, there's a lot of pitches. You don't have to swing at every pitch. You don't have to get involved with everything. Focus on what it's going to take to move the runner, right?
Yes.
To score that run.
Yes. Yes.
Who's your favorite baseball player?
Since it's got to be a Cleveland Indian, Omar Vizquel, who's a shortstop for the Indians, and now today's Francisco Lindor is probably the guys I would cite first. And I like guys like that because I'm short of stature, and so when I see a guy short of stature really elevating their game and really standing out amongst their peers, that's kind of a fun deal. Jose Altuve for the Astros, even with what's happened to the Astros,
Yeah, sure.
Another really exciting ball player.
Yeah,
so.
he's changed. What he brings to the game, that mentality changes the game, I believe.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Scott, I want to ask you a pretty serious question, all right?
Okay.
We live in a day and age where people have the perception of what it means to be a strong leader. I mean, no one ever says, especially, we're going through this crisis now and everyone's been affected and every leader's having to look carefully 3 and 4 and 5 times a day at what we're doing or what we're going to be able to get back to doing, or, what do we learn from this? But nobody ever goes, what we really need is a weak leader. I mean, everybody uses the phrase, we need strong leadership.
Right.
And then there's the misconception, I believe, that to be a strong leader, you've got to be over the top. You've got to be bombastic. You got to pound the
Right.
table or pound the pulpit or lecturing or whatever it is.
That's right.
And that's what it means to be a strong leader. And yet everything I've been learning the last 15, 20 years in my study of leadership is that there's several ways to be a strong leader. So what comes to mind when you hear the phrase a strong leader?
Yeah, I probably have fallen into the same trap you're implying. In my past, when I've thought strong leader, I used to think very outgoing, very loud, very almost bold to a point of stubbornness. But I think when you've lived in the leadership seat, you start realizing that style doesn't always work, and in fact, a lot of times it's actually counterproductive. In fact, it was funny. We my team had a Bible study earlier this week, and we got on this very same topic. And when you just think about leadership, we learn from our faith and watching the example that Jesus gave. Obviously, arguably the greatest leader we all look up to, and how infrequent it was for him to lose his cool or lose his temper and be so, as you called it, bombastic. It was the opposite. I think of business literature I'm familiar with, like the Jim Collins books, The Good to Great and The Great by Choice. And I think there was some study he did where he examined all these different CEOs who had done so well and found that it was actually more common that the successful CEOs were very quiet, maybe even introverted, and much more humble in front of their teams. And that struck me because it's not even in my wiring to be that loud, bombastic type of leader anyway. But I find that if you can be empathetic with your folks and really try to understand where they're coming from and really listen to them, you're much more likely to get the buy-in you need to really get your team to another level.
Well, there's two disciples that are highlighted a lot in the scriptures, James and John, and they were called the sons of thunder.
Yes.
And I think that had a lot to do with personality. And they were like being on the Sea of Galilee, and this storm comes, and there'd be thunder and lightning, and sometimes maybe helpful rain, and sometimes a storm that came up or a tempest. And yet I noticed that through their life and their service, that suddenly they become known for being dependable and reliable and helpful and whatever it takes to accomplish what we got to get done. And so it's interesting to see the change even in their lives based on the example you just talked about.
Yes, yes.
Now, you've spent many years as an actuary. Now, that's a term I'm just learning about, but
Yeah.
once I learned about it, I realized the importance of it and the necessity of it, and that there's got to be some actuaries in every organization for them to accomplish the big goal or the big dream. So you spent a lot of time. I've noticed that you spent 18 years at one of the leading insurance companies, and then you've gone to be a senior vice president, and now you're the CEO of the largest Christian, I want to say healthcare, but service provider
Yep.
for the Christian community. It's called CCM and Medishare. And that's, it's interesting. You've paid your dues serving, learning the industry, being a leader in that industry. And now that's quite a major, I don't want to say career shift, but maybe even a change in calling. I don't know. How do you describe, I know you're proud of your background, and well, you should be. That's why a very significant organization turned to you when they really needed strong leadership, right? So we know those skills have played a great role and are helpful. But I ask you to make a change like that, still caring about how people are doing and their welfare and their family being provided for, to handle all the different things that life throws at them. But I just wonder, how do you describe this change, and especially when you get back with some of your former associates and they've known you as being such a leader in that world? Is it apples and oranges, or is it much closer than we would realize?
Well, it's a great question. And honestly, I've reflected on this too, because I would not have predicted landing here many, many years ago. It's one of those stories that if there was ever a time in my life I really felt like God was talking to me, it was in discovering this position and ultimately being offered the opportunity to lead this ministry. But you are right. There is a bit of a right turn in my career that got me here. I had a boss at one of my prior positions who himself was an actuary, and he used to refer to himself as a recovering actuary, almost almost kidding about just wanting to disavow himself from that technical background. And he was now the CEO of one of the companies I'd worked for before. And I appreciate where he's coming from, but yet, that professional, financial, technical background that an actuary learns and becomes proficient in, certainly has served me well, because, it is certainly a part of what I bring in a leadership role, that I have an analytical depth that can allow me to, dive into an awful lot of different aspects of almost any organization and hit the ground running, even though there's certainly lots of things I've got to learn. But to be honest with you, this isn't as big of a right turn as it might seem, because that organization that I was with for so long was Guide One Insurance. And so I served as an actuary there, and then I was a chief operating officer there. And what they were known for, even though it was property casualty insurance, was they insured churches all over the country. And so they had a connection to a world that, I'm now even deeper in with having now come to Christian Care Ministry. So, I discovered this role, the CEO role at Christian Care Ministry. The more I learned about it, there was a nice application of some of the things I've learned, but could now bring them, certainly some of the mistakes I made too, and bring them here and learn from them and help this organization get better. So, yeah, just to be clear too, what we are, Christian Care Ministry is a Christian ministry, but its ministry is running this program called Medishare. And, it's referred to as a healthcare sharing ministry. It's different than insurance, but a lot of people think of it as kind of an alternative to insurance. But it's a really wonderful combination that serves, right now serves Christians. We've got about 400,000 Christians around the country that are part of this program, and it's still growing. And it's a wonderful alternative out there that we'd like more and more people to get to know, because it's not even a business proposition. It's literally, it's evangelism. We think this is a better way to do healthcare for so many people. And we think there's, more and more people in our, at least U.S. society, could benefit from it.
Well, Scott, the first time I ever heard of Medi-Share, like millions of people that have now heard about it, I think I'm watching Fox, or one of the other shows that I'm not allowed to mention. But I first heard about this concept, that there's this tremendous group of people of faith, and they believe the book of Acts gives a great way to help families and to help businesses and to navigate all the things we're facing. And I'm going, it just sounded a little too good to be true. As even somebody, a person of faith, I'm going, come on, this is the last thing we need. People standing up going, we're a Christian organization and we're going to help. We're all going to get together and we're going to help you share some of the medical care needs that your family will have or you will have. And I'm going, man, we don't need some new startup group, saying, oh, we're going to do that, making all these big promises. Now, I don't like admitting when I'm wrong, but hello, I found out that this Christian care ministry had been around for 25 years.
That's right.
And I found out that Medi-Share had been battle tested for decades. I mean, for 25 years, over 400,000 people today, all have come together. And then I got to hear the staggering amount of the total. Is it like $4 million is
Oh, you're talking about how much we've shared over time? Yeah. It's $4 billion. That's right.
$4 billion. I almost said that and I thought, Jay, don't be, I didn't want to be over the top and bombastic. So there's right now 400,000 people, right? And there's right now $4 billion
that we have shared over time. That's right.
That you have shared over those years.
Yes.
And help people. And of course, I love what you do because number one, you provide a standard. Hey, listen, if you're going to be part of what we're doing, there's some lifestyle and there's some health guidelines. And every one of them are what I hear from my doctor almost every time I go. I mean, how to live healthy, how to have a long life, and how to also, now we're finding out how, I guess, fragile all of us are in our own lives and how fragile everything about, we've had a real awakening with what all we've gone through with this virus. So people are wondering, how in the world am I going to handle all the bills I have? What is going to happen to my business? And I come right back to something that absolutely has made a huge difference in my life. So I'm a fan, for full disclosure. I believe in Medi-Share, and for all those that know about student leadership and everything we do with students, Scott, the reason we're able to train, 7,000 to 10,000 youth pastors, and the reason we've now had 250,000 students go through our student leadership program is that CCM has been one of the great, great partners in our life and supporters, because I know you care about youth. Yep. And I don't want to get ahead of myself and bury the lead, but our very first conversation when I met you, we spent 10 minutes talking about Medi-Share, and we spent 35, 40 minutes talking about the work you've done with at-risk students and your concern for young people and coaching young boys. So I just want to say to all of those that know what we do, we've got somebody that really cares about the things we care about. And I shared with you over dinner that I had a time in my life where I looked up as a young man who didn't have some good models as parents. I went through 6 broken homes, 6 foster homes and all that stuff. And so I, had a moment of faith where the Lord changed my life, and I go on with a new calling and a new sense of direction. But yet there were twice in my life that I almost lost everything because I never thought the need to be prepared. I was young, I was bulletproof, I was in my early 20s, I just got out of college, and we found out we had a little baby coming, but we had a lot of problems in the pregnancy, and my wife was bedridden for months and in the pregnancy. And then when the baby came, our little girl, there was some challenges and some situations, and then an open heart surgery at 2 months. And I don't want to belabor all that, but say I looked up, and here I was, $250,000 at least in medical expenses, and all of a sudden, it affected my testimony. It affected what I thought was going to happen with my whole future. I wasn't providing. I didn't know that as the father and the mother, I mean, what everybody listening to this podcast already knows, but maybe I'm being defensive, but I just never thought, and that was something you worry about down the road, having healthcare solutions, so number one. And then number two, 3 years later, being the genius I am, after, by the grace of God, paid off all those bills, but it changed everything I was doing. Then now all of a sudden, we had all the spine surgeries and another eye surgery and hearing impairment. I mean, so there have been 2 times in my life that I wish somebody would have grabbed me by the collar and said, Jay, you've got to have these healthcare solutions for your family, and you do have to be prepared for what comes. And I would have given anything. And that's why I love telling youth pastors, and that's why I love telling pastors and headmasters of schools, and then the businessmen of so many smaller businesses, that there's a way to have something not only for your family, but also for your company. And I know y'all have made some significant changes in that. So tell us, without apology, I was wrong. Y'all have an impeccable reputation. I mean, that ought to be shouted from every housetop, that this is for real. I mean, crystal clear. You can proof in the pudding. This is muscle. This isn't a fad or something that's been around 25 years.
Yeah. Well, let me try to address that, because that's really important. I will admit, when I came to Christian Care Ministry and Medi-Share, I hadn't heard of Medi-Share. How almost embarrassing is that for me to admit? But that's a fact. But what I now know, I'm going to trumpet from the rooftops. Whereas, first of all, let's put this in perspective. I mean, healthcare sharing ministries like ours, there's a handful of them out there, and we take care of maybe 1 million U.S. citizens. Well, there's 330 million U.S. citizens, so it's still a small thing right now. And so that's why, if you don't have familiarity with it, it's easy to fall into the trap of, you hear a little criticism or someone shares something they're not so sure of about it, and you get the wrong impression. But let's try to use this opportunity to correct that impression here. So forget the faith part of it for a second. I mean, all this really is a group of members coming together and saying, we are trying to devise a way to help each other with our healthcare burdens as they come up. We're all going to have them at some point in life, right? But we've got to find a way to make it affordable. And we look at the way, the federal government, state governments have tried to establish health insurance systems, and they tend to throw everything in the kitchen sink into those plans, and it makes it very, very expensive. And so part of what we're coming together with is to set some guidelines as to what will be shared. That is an attempt to try to make things more affordable. But now mix in faith. I mean, I like to think of the Bible as the best business literature, right? And so you could look at a lot of the precepts and guidelines that God has given us, whether it's Old or New Testament, as to how to live, what's the model for living. And you can get some guidelines there that you can apply in saying, well, what makes sense to share, and what kinds of things by our values, led by the model God has established, would we want to share in, so that we're feeling that what we share in as a community is consistent with our faith, our beliefs. And when you merge all of that together, you end up with a more affordable but yet more caring solution. And so, some unique things about it are, when you interact with us, if you're calling in about a bill, or you're calling in about you've got a sharing need and you need the community to come to your aid, when you talk to our member representatives, as we call them, they're going to pray with you. How many insurance companies do that when you call in? They don't, right? It's a very warm experience. And, now put some business metrics on it. You've heard of the Better Business Bureau and ratings of the Better Business Bureau. And, they're just judging what it's like, what they've heard from customers interacting with Medi-Share as an example, and we have very high Better Business Bureau ratings. So customer satisfaction, there's something called a Net Promoter Score that a lot of businesses use to judge how do their customers feel about them. We have very high Net Promoter Score. So whether you use business metrics or faith and just, that those abstract judgments as to what this is like, we think we have a better solution, a more affordable solution, and just a warmer, better experience for our members than what you experience if you go into traditional health insurance. Certainly because of what the membership has decided they will share in, there may be some limitations there that others would see as problematic. So it's not a solution we say is for everybody as it's currently designed. But you rattled off several that would find this very attractive. If you're a business owner, you don't have a large business, you're a small business person, your choice is to go into those individual health exchanges, and it's sky high costs. And, we can probably cut that in half if you come into our program. And churches is another example. We're starting to also move out of not just doing individual memberships, but even groups like churches or some nonprofit organizations could have a whole group of employees come into Medi-Share. So I think it's going to be a solution that a lot of different parts of the population or groups will find very attractive.
Well, I meet a lot of people that are, I've been down, we all know the roads we've traveled and who we've met and what we've learned. But I meet a lot of people, and I've been down some of the roads now at my age that they're just now going down. And to hear them talk about, man, we've been able to now send our children to a private school with the money that we've been saving monthly. And I mean, that just blew my mind. I knew that this was a great healthcare solution. I knew it would help somebody when those moments come and like I went through, but then it didn't really dawn on me that the monthly difference. In other words, we're now able to do a couple things for our family we've never been able to do before. And yet we have this situation come up, and it was everything that I could hope it would be. So there's really that two-edged sword. In the sense that two sides to this coin, I guess, is better than two-edged sword.
Well, that's right. Yeah, obviously, that has actually been a thought with this, even before I got here, there's certainly been a thought that if we can make healthcare solutions more affordable for our members, what could they do for the kingdom, so to speak, in their communities or for their families if they can save a little, because it really is, as it stands today, the solution in the country, other than what we offer, if you go into the health insurance exchanges and you got to buy at full price there, oh boy, that's a lot of money. And we think we've got an alternative that a lot of folks, especially Christians, agree.
I need options. I need, somebody, don't just say, I got to do this or this. I love options. I love multiple opportunities for me to kind of weigh in the balance and test.
Yeah, and let me just add this. I personally don't fault what government officials at the federal and the state level are trying to do. It is a vexing problem to figure out how we improve the healthcare system and the health financing solution. You hear the Medicare for Alls and Obamacare and all of that. There's well-meaning behind all those proposals, but what we're trying to get across is healthcare sharing is a truly innovative alternative that could really work for more and more people. So don't demonize innovation. Whether you're a Christian or not, there's some underpinnings to this model that could be very attractive. So, just like you said, we want choices, and there's a reason we want choices. Sometimes those choices ultimately start showing a better way, and we think we may have a better way for at least a segment of the population.
I'm pretty excited about some of the things you're working on and have made some real strides in, like everybody, especially at certain ages. What about pre-existing conditions? Or like my daughter, she's got pre-existing conditions, and she'll have those after I'm gone, And so I'm very excited about what y'all are doing in that area.
Yeah, so let's talk about that too, because that deserves some clarification. So it is true today, when you come into the Medishare program as a new member, if you're coming in as an individual, pre-existing conditions are something that you've got to be with the program for generally 3 years before the program is going to share in anything related to those pre-existing conditions. So that has certainly been a concern for folks with pre-existing condition. How do I come into this program? But we are now embarking on a group solution that would enable some combination of Medishare and maybe some other programs to be essentially bundled together. So a group that has some folks within it that have pre-existing conditions can get, their situation dealt with appropriately. And I wouldn't rule out that down the road, there's a very direct Medishare option that might have some kind of provision for pre-existing conditions stronger than, hey, you got to wait for 3 years. So we're well aware of that issue. It's a challenging one. Even the health insurers, if left to their own devices, wouldn't just naturally pay for that. I mean, the whole concept of insurance is you're paying for, you're, in their language, covering things that are uncertain, unexpected. Well, the system kind of breaks down when you throw pre-existing in, but yet individuals have pre-existing conditions. You got to do something about them. We can't just leave them uncared for. So it's always been a vexing problem. The health insurers, they either get subsidies or, there's some way that, the system allows for that to now be paid for, or they can take their prices up to pay for it. But healthcare sharing, it kind of sits outside the system. So right now, there's not an accommodation that makes it very easy for the healthcare sharing ministry programs to take in the pre-existing condition type of individual. But we see some ways, as I'm describing, that we're at least at Medishare now devising ways to try to address that as well.
Well, what I would just encourage, there's a great concept. I learned it in Ireland years ago. Greatest thing you can do for a friend is share a friend. And so I had two desires today. I believe you've met and exceeded those. Number one, I wanted to introduce a leader that I believe we need to know and need to hear from and can benefit from. Also, I love your model of being a leader. While I'm over the top usually and loud and bombastic, I'm very impressed by those that measure twice and cut once. I'll clear half the forest and go, all right, we need to measure this. I mean, so I wanted to introduce to my friends another friend that, man, this is somebody that has really paid the price and someone that's, I think, earned the right to be trusted. And most of all, has the spirit and the desire to make a difference. One last question is what I try to ask everybody on our podcast before we go. A lot of voices out there clamoring for your attention, our attention. Who are a couple voices? You mentioned to Jim Collins, and that was a definitive study and made an impact on you or an imprint on you. But are there a couple voices that you listen to as a businessman, or maybe as a father, in your journey? But are there a couple voices that you can think of that you would share with your friends now that you listen to? Because there's a lot of echoes out there. Some people only want to hear from those that agree with everything we agree with. But then there are those that are voices and those that are echoes.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot. I probably, unlike a lot of folks, I really have never in my career, my experiences, I can't say I've necessarily had a mentor. I too had, I think you said it earlier in your comments, growing up, my father and I, my parents divorced, my father and I had kind of a tough relationship. And so didn't have kind of a natural mentor growing up in that way. So I can't really say that, but I will say this. First of all, faith does matter a lot. I mean, prayer is, there is a voice on the other side of that, right? And so that does, I do turn to prayer for guidance a lot. I'm a huge history buff. And so I do tend to gravitate toward, so obviously if you're looking backwards, you're not hearing a voice per se, but I do read books or watch movies about lots of different leaders. So whether it's Winston Churchill or Ronald Reagan or, leaders like that have always fascinated me, especially the ones that are, I've had situations where they're trying to break through with some new ideas and are taking it from all sides and staying calm in the process has always impressed me. I tend to gravitate to even movies that are about the same kind of characters. So that's a big one. The other thing I would just say for anyone who gets into a leadership position, don't be afraid to bring in a coach of some sort, because I've actually had the experience of having an executive coach. I got into a chief operating officer position when I was at a prior company, and the board there offered me, hey, work with this executive coach for a couple of weeks. Might give you a few pointers just to get started in your new role. And after 2 weeks, realized, wow, this is terrific. Just having that sounding board, just kind of keeping you sane in some ways. And so asked if I could keep him on, and ended up having him as really by my side for 4 years. So I'm a big fan of having that kind of sounding board as well. So whether you have that naturally with a brother, a wife, a father, or you get it through an executive coach, it's really, really critical. But I can't diminish the prayer. I mean, the prayer and some of the guidance, the stories about Jesus. There was one that I'll just share quickly that I just saw the other day, thinking about this whole topic of trying to stay calm in the storms. And there's the whole passage in, I think it's Matthew 14, where, Jesus goes through this experience where he learns his friend John's been beheaded, and then he tries to kind of get away, and the disciples follow him and tell him, you got 5,000 people out here, needing fed, and he finds a way to get them fed. And then his disciples go away again, and they get caught in a storm, and he's got to go out and calm them all down, and walks out on the water and says, you have little faith. And, he's staying even keel through all of this. And it's just a great model to just remind ourselves, no matter what challenges you're facing, there's the model. Just God's not going to throw at you more than you can handle. He's going to be there for you.
Wow. Great word. Well, I can see the Churchill influence on you. Stay calm and carry on,
Yes,
but
yes.
I do believe we need some of those voices in our life. Well, Scott, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for how involved you've been in helping young people. I want to thank you for being a great friend, but also I want to just say I'm very grateful for your leadership style and your influence, and look forward to serving with you in many different ways down the road.
Jay,
Wish
I
you
really
and
appreciate
your
your
family
time.
and your amazing organization the best.
Thank you, Jay. You have a great organization as well. So let's stay in touch, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, buddy.
Bless you.